I found her in our kitchen at 2 in the afternoon, still wearing his cologne. Not hers. His. I know because I'd smelled it before. At the company Christmas party 2 years back, on a guy named Theo from accounting. Tall guy, younger than me. Always had that sharp cedar thing going. I'd noticed it then and moved on. I noticed it standing in my own kitchen on a Tuesday in March, and I didn't move on. I stood in the doorway with a bag of groceries in each hand and I just stopped. My wife was rinsing a coffee cup at the sink. Her back was to me. She didn't hear me come in because I'd taken my boots off at the garage door, like I always do. She was humming something. She looked relaxed. That's what I remember most, how relaxed she looked. "Hey," I said. She turned around and smiled at me and said, "You're home early." I set the bags on the counter. I kissed her on the cheek. And I didn't say a word about the cologne. We'd been married 16 years. I was 43. She was 39. We had a daughter who was 14 and a son who was 11. And we lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Knoxville that I'd paid off 2 years before I was supposed to. I ran an HVAC company, 12 employees, mostly residential, some light commercial work. We weren't rich, but we were stable. I worked hard for that stability. I thought she valued it. She used to. That's what I keep coming back to. She used to. I'd noticed things over the previous year, maybe longer if I'm being honest with myself. She started going to the gym at odd hours. She bought new clothes, the kind she hadn't worn since before the kids. She started taking her phone into the bathroom. When I'd ask how her day was, she'd give me a version of it. Not a lie exactly, more like an edited summary. Something was missing from it. I told myself I was tired and paranoid. I told myself it a lot. The cologne in the kitchen was the first thing I couldn't explain away. I didn't confront her that night. I ate dinner with my family, helped my son with a science project about the water cycle, watched 20 minutes of television, and went to bed. My wife kissed me on the cheek and said she was going to stay up a little longer. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The next morning I drove to my office on Merchant Drive and sat down with a man I trusted more than almost anyone, my company's attorney. A guy who'd done my business contracts for 8 years. I told him what I'd noticed. Not as a husband. As a man trying to think clearly, he listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "Before you do anything, document everything. Don't access her accounts without permission. Don't say anything that signals you know. And call a divorce attorney today, not next week. Today." I called one that afternoon. A woman who specialized in high-conflict family law. She said almost exactly what my business attorney had said. Document. Don't tip your hand. Understand what you're walking into before you walk into it. She explained Tennessee law to me. How courts view infidelity. What the process looks like for someone with my financial situation. What I needed to protect. I spent the next 3 weeks watching and waiting. I hated every minute of it. I reviewed our phone bill, calls to the same out-of-state number. Sometimes late at night, sometimes mid-morning when she was supposedly running errands. I started paying attention to her schedule the way I hadn't in years. She went to a yoga class on Wednesday evenings that she'd never mentioned before. She came home from that class glowing, in a way that had nothing to do with yoga. I also quietly moved a significant portion of our liquid savings into a separate account. Nothing that wasn't mine to move, nothing deceptive, just protection. My attorney advised it. I organized every financial document we had, the house deed, retirement accounts, business valuation, tax returns for 6 years. I put them in a binder and gave a copy to my attorney. And then I arranged for cameras in my office. I know how that sounds. But here's the thing. I'd been considering security cameras for the business for over a year. Clients leave equipment behind. We keep expensive parts in the back. It wasn't crazy. I went with a system that covered the main floor, the back workshop, and my private office. HD. Motion activated. Cloud backup. I had them installed on a Friday. The following Tuesday at 11:17 in the morning, while I was supposedly at a commercial bid on the other side of town, I checked the cloud feed from my truck. My wife was in my office with a man. Not Theo from accounting. Someone I didn't recognize. They weren't working. I sat in that truck for 40 minutes. I didn't move. I just watched the timestamp count up on my phone. When I finally started the engine, I drove to a gas station, went into the bathroom, and threw up. My daughter plays travel softball. My son is obsessed with building things. Lego, model trains. Doesn't matter. Just anything, with pieces that connect. Those are the images that kept coming to me in the days that followed. My daughter running the bases, my son bent over a table with his tongue between his teeth, concentrating. I kept thinking, whatever I do next has to protect them. Not punish my wife. Protect my kids. That was harder than it's when you're as angry as I was. My attorney told me I had strong grounds, not just for divorce, for favorable terms in the divorce. Tennessee courts take infidelity seriously, in ways that affect asset division, and sometimes custody considerations, depending on how things play out. She told me to be patient. She told me the worst thing I could do was blow up publicly before we had a strategy. I agreed with her. I went home. I kept going home. 3 more weeks of that. Dinners at the table. Helping with homework. Talking about what to do with the backyard. Whether we should restain the deck this summer. Normal. All of it normal. She had no idea I knew anything. I got very good at acting. The morning I left, it was a Wednesday in April. My wife drove the kids to school at 7:45 like always. The moment her car turned out of the neighborhood, I moved. I'd been planning it for 2 weeks. I had 2 bags packed in my truck bed, under a tarp. Personal documents, clothes, the items that were mine and only mine. I had arrangements made. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, a man I'd been close to for 20 years, had a vacant rental property in a town about 2 hours east. He knew some of what was happening. Not all of it, but enough. He handed over a key, no questions asked. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "I know, I've retained an attorney. You'll receive paperwork within the week. Please don't contact me except through counsel." 6 words at the start. I know, that's all I felt I owed her. I picked up my kids from school that afternoon like it was any other day. I told them something had come up, and they were going to stay with me for a little while. At a new place, like an adventure. My daughter looked at me for a long moment. 14-year-olds see more than we give them credit for, and she said, "Is everything okay?" I told her we'd talk when things were more settled. My son asked if the new place had a good table for building. I told him we'd get one. My wife came home that evening to an empty house and a note. What happened next surprised me. I thought there would be anger first. Desperation second. Instead, it went. Desperation. Then something that looked like relief. Then, when she realized the paperwork was real, and the financial picture was becoming clear, fury. She hired an attorney within 48 hours. Good one, too. A man known in Knoxville legal circles for being aggressive. He sent a letter to my attorney that was long on threats and short on substance. My wife wanted me to return to the marital home. She wanted full access to all financial accounts. She wanted the kids back immediately. My attorney's response, from what I was told, was measured and direct. The children were safe, were in school, were being cared for. Any concerns about their welfare could be addressed through proper channels. And as for the rest, we'd see them in mediation. We never made it to mediation. 3 weeks after I left, I got a call from my attorney. My wife had filed an emergency motion with the court. The allegation. I had taken the children without her consent and was refusing to facilitate contact. She was using the word abduction through her attorney. Not in a criminal complaint, not quite, but close enough to make my blood run cold. I called my attorney and the first thing she said was, "I expected this. Don't panic. You haven't broken any law. The kids were in your care legally. She's trying to force your hand." She was right. But the words still landed hard. What followed was 6 weeks of the most unpleasant legal process I've ever experienced. Motions and countermotions. An emergency custody hearing in which both attorneys argued in front of a judge who had seen it all before and looked mildly bored by the theatrics. My wife sat at the other table in a gray blazer. I'd bought her for a conference 3 years ago. She didn't look at me once. Her attorney made the case that I had unilaterally removed the children from the home and was interfering with her parental rights. My attorney responded by introducing the financial documentation I'd assembled, the timeline of the marriage, and, with the court's permission, the security footage from my office. The judge watched a portion of it. Not long, maybe 4 minutes. He set it aside and asked my wife's attorney a question. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something about whether his client wished to proceed with the characterization of my departure as an unlawful act, given what the court had just viewed. There was a brief recess. When we came back, the emergency motion had been withdrawn. The full divorce took another 7 months. It wasn't clean. There's no such thing as clean when children are involved, but it was decisive. We went to trial on the contested issues. The footage from my office, combined with the documentation my attorney had built, painted a picture that was difficult for my wife's legal team to counter. The man in my office, I'd learned by then, was a contractor she'd met at a community fundraiser 2 years before. He was married too. His wife was not notified by me. That was between them. But I'd heard later that things fell apart over there as well. My wife was awarded parenting time. That was always going to happen. She's their mother, and whatever she did to me, the court takes that seriously. But primary physical custody went to me. The house, which I'd paid for largely before and during the marriage through the business, was valued and divided in a way that allowed me to buy her out rather than sell. The business was my premarital asset, built before we met, grown during the marriage but established on my sole labor. My attorney had argued that, clearly, and the court agreed in most part. My wife walked away with less than she expected. I didn't celebrate that. I wasn't trying to punish her, but I wasn't going to pretend that what she did had no consequences either. My daughter found out the full story about 6 months after the divorce was final. Not from me. She pieced it together the way smart kids do, through half sentences, and the things adults don't say. She came to me one Sunday evening and sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, just tell me what happened." So I did. As much as a father should tell a 14-year-old. She was quiet for a long time afterward. Then she said, "I kind of knew something was wrong for a while." I told her I was sorry she'd had to carry that. She said she was okay. I believed her. My son took longer to understand, which is right for his age. He knows his parents don't live together anymore. He knows it's not his fault. I've told him that so many times, it's become something like a prayer between us. He still asks me sometimes, when it's late and we're watching something on TV, if things are going to be okay. I always tell him yes, and I mean it. There's a part of this story I haven't told yet, and it's the part that came the closest to breaking me. About 4 months into the divorce process, my wife's attorney sent a new demand. She wanted the children enrolled back in their original school district, which would mean returning them to her custody, pending the divorce settlement. The basis was disruption to their education. They had, in fact, transferred to a school near my rental property. A good school, smaller, and both kids had adjusted well. Their teachers said so in writing. But her attorney argued it was my unilateral decision and constituted ongoing interference. My attorney filed a counter-argument that included statements from the kids' new teachers, their counselor, their pediatrician. She filed a declaration from my son's teacher about how his academic performance had actually improved since the transfer. She filed a statement from the school counselor, who'd been meeting with my daughter bi-weekly, and reported that she was managing the family transition in a healthy way. My wife's attorney, as a last move, requested that the school produce my children's transfer records, presumably to challenge the timeline of the enrollment and suggest I'd acted secretly. The school's response was to confirm what was already in our filings. They didn't produce anything new. They didn't need to. At the final custody hearing, the judge asked my wife directly whether her primary concern was the welfare of the children or the restoration of her prior custody arrangement. I'm paraphrasing his language, but that was the substance. She said she just wanted to be with her kids. He said he understood that, and he awarded her alternating weekends and extended summertime. She didn't get what she came for. I found out later, through a mutual friend who I think meant well, that she told people I had poisoned the kids against her, that I'd turned them into weapons. I thought about that for a long time. My daughter still calls her mother. My son still wants to show her the things he builds. I didn't turn them into anything. And I just got out of the way and let them be kids. It's been almost 2 years since the morning I left that note on the counter. The rental property is gone. I bought a house about 8 miles from the original neighborhood, still in the same school district. Close enough that the kids' lives didn't have to change more than they already had. It's smaller than the Colonial. I don't mind. It feels like mine in a way the other one stopped feeling. I've kept the HVAC business. We had a strong year last year, added 2 new technicians. I still work long hours, maybe longer than I should. But it's different now. I come home to my kids, and that sharpens everything. Makes the work feel like it's pointed at something real. My daughter started her junior year this fall. She's looking at colleges that have good softball programs. She wants to study environmental science, which I didn't see coming, but which makes complete sense once you know her. She's steady and sharp, and sometimes when she's focused on something, I see something in her face that stops me cold. She looks like she knows exactly who she is. I don't know where she got that. Maybe from both of us. Maybe she just built it herself. My son finished a model of the Golden Gate Bridge last spring. It took him 6 weeks and about 3,000 pieces, and he set it up on a card table in the living room and wouldn't let anyone near it for a month. Eventually, he let me photograph it. And then he took it apart to use the pieces for something new. That's him. Exactly. I don't know what my wife's life looks like now. I haven't asked. I know she moved into an apartment on the west side of the city. I know she still works at the medical billing office where she's been for 8 years. I know the man from my office is not in her life anymore, at least not in any visible way. Beyond that, it's not my business. For a long time, I thought I'd need to know, need to track the narrative, need to see how it ended for her. I don't anymore. What I know is this. There were 63 days between the afternoon I stood at my kitchen door, smelling someone else's cologne, and the morning I left my house forever. 63 days of going through the motions of a marriage that had already ended. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than any legal fight. Harder than telling my kids. Just showing up every day to something that was already gone. I don't regret doing it that way. My attorney was right. The patience cost me 63 days, but it protected my children, protected my business, and gave me a position in court that I never could have had if I'd walked in hot and made it a scene. I'd have gotten angry. I'd have made mistakes. I know myself well enough to know that. Someone asked me recently, a guy from my church, going through his own version of this, whether I had any advice. He's younger than me, mid-30s, no kids yet, just trying to figure out which direction to fall. I told him 3 things. First, don't do anything in the first 48 hours, except talk to an attorney. Your instincts in those hours are correct, but your impulses are not. The instinct that says protect yourself is right. The impulse that says burn it down tonight is wrong. Second, if you can, document quietly, not to get revenge, not to win, but because courts deal in evidence, not in feelings, and you need to be able to tell your story in the language the court speaks. Third, the person who hurt you will probably keep being who they are. That's not your problem to fix. The only thing you can actually control is who you choose to be on the other side of it. He thanked me and said he'd think about it. I hope he does. My son called me last night around 9 o'clock. He stays with his mother on alternating weeks now, and he said, "Dad, I think I know what I want to build next." I asked him what. He said he wanted to try a suspension bridge, but bigger than the Golden Gate, his own design, no instructions. I told him that sounded like exactly the right kind of hard. He laughed. That call lasted 22 minutes. I counted, because I had nothing else I needed to be doing, and nowhere else I needed to be, and for 22 minutes I just got to be his dad. That's the whole thing, right there. That's what I fought for.